I feel like for everyone who's into language learning, and now we're talking about this transition because this transition is so important. And I think we, like, talking about comprehensible input, should not forget about it, because it doesn't mean by listening and reading that one feels confident enough and prepared enough to talk.
I always thought that by just getting input, output is going to show up, which is true. But hi, Lari.
Hi, Alvaro.
Well, welcome to the podcast. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for your invite. It's amazing what you created with your channel, and I'm super happy to be here with you today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And let's to get things started. Why don't you tell us about your background a little bit, the language background, especially the languages you speak. When did you start learning languages? When did you realize that it wasn't working? Anything that you think is relevant.
All right. So, I'm native German speaking, but not from Germany, from Austria. So I grew up in Austria. I went to school in Austria. And as I think everyone, at least in Europe, I learned English. Probably I was in my last primary school year, so 4th grade primary school. Usually back then we started learning English in a more playful way, and then continued obviously in secondary school. And unfortunately, as is probably still nowadays, the input we've got was most of the time grammar input, right? Structure of the language, listening comprehensions, tiny little bits. Most of the time, an English teacher that was speaking German with us, explaining everything. So it was far off what we today consider as good or comprehensible English classes. Mm-hmm. And then I went to university. So I'm a trained teacher. I'm a special needs teacher because I've soon realized that the school system, how it is, the way learning content is presented, is not working for most of the children in the classroom, not only for kids with special needs. And I wanted to learn more about that. I wanted to learn about how to differentiate, how to break down things, like learning contents. And as a special needs teacher in Austria, you have to teach all of the subject from primary to secondary school. And I knew that I would also have to teach English. And I always had this certain standard for myself that I said, if I have to teach a foreign language, I want to be able to keep this class in English. And after I graduated, I wasn't able to do that. I didn't know how to say, please come together in a seating circle whatsoever. I was not able to keep a conversation in English. I felt very insecure about it, so I decided after I graduated university to go to England. There I was working as a language assistant for German, so helping English German teachers teach their students German, where I could also learn a lot about what's good German, we call it DAF, German as a foreign language, what's good, DAF lessons or classes, and what could be improved. And there, obviously, I also improved my English, through immersion, through living with other housemates, native housemates, Spanish-speaking, French-speaking flatmates. And yes, I enjoyed teaching German as a foreign language actually so much that I then applied for positions outside, where I then moved to Mexico, where I lived for 3 years.
There you go.
And yes, it was a great experience. I love Mexico. My husband's family is still living in Mexico, so we are still very close. And then we moved to England, where we've been living for the past 3 years, and now we're in Germany. And yes, as you could already tell, my husband is Spanish, like native, but his family is from Brazil. So he grew up speaking 3 languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Now learning German. So I've been surrounded since then by many, many languages. And I could learn a lot through living abroad in other countries, learning different languages, working a lot with students of different ages, kids, obviously, but then also students, university students, adults, elderly students that wanted to learn German or English.
Right.
Yes, and I've been learning and learning along the way, myself learning languages, but also helping other people learn German.
Nice story. And I'm curious about your first experience in England. Like, how was your English back then? Meaning, how much could you communicate before getting there? How much could you understand?
Mm-hmm. Funny story, if you're asking me how much could you understand. I mean, to be honest, the English accent, British English, is different. And we usually, like all of the movies, series and stuff, it's all in American English, right? And I remember myself arriving at the airport. It was London Gatwick, and everyone who has been to this airport knows that there is a train. So there are different public transport connections. I was living in Kent back then, and I needed to buy a ticket, but I could not navigate. It was my first time like being by myself on an airport. And I thought, it's going to be easy. English. I know a tiny little bit. I can ask for, can I buy a ticket, or where can I buy a ticket? And I can show them my phone with the address I needed to go. And this person was talking to me in its, I don't know from where this person was from, but I could not understand a thing. And then I had someone next to me who had to translate it to me. So my English, and maybe just from a grades perspective, at university, I had a grade 4. So we have the system of 5 is the worst grade. You will fail with a 5. And on my last exam, I got a 4. It was on pronunciation, and I think I just had to read a book. And it was horrible. It was really horrible. I felt very insecure. If I today would need to sort me in this A0 to C2, I was maybe on a 1, 2.
Okay.
Yeah, not that great. Not that great.
And that after many years of school.
And that exactly, like that's the biggest thing, like that after 9 years of supposedly learning a language. Yes.
Yeah, we've all been there, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, comparing that now to those 8 months I've been living in England. And within those 8 months, I basically became fluent, what's considered as fluent. Not perfect. Like I'm still making a lot of mistakes grammar-wise, and vocabulary is missing. But fluent in the sense that in my next job in Mexico, I was not only asked to teach German, but also English. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, yeah, we all make mistakes all the time, but it's just the feeling of being able to communicate in any situation, get your point across, and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, I was asking you mainly because sometimes that's immersion has its dangers, right? Because when you get to a place where the language is spoken, but you're starting from scratch or you don't know anything, it can actually be counterproductive, right? Intuitive, sorry, because it is, there's nothing's comprehensible. There's a lot of pressure, right? You don't understand anyone. You can say anything. So we tend to think that by immersing ourselves in the language in that country, like magically, we're going to learn the language, but it's not that easy, right?
And I agree 100% with you on that point, because I've had the complete comparison between, okay, arriving to the UK with a good A1, let's consider it as an A2 level, and then being able to adapt. And a year later, arriving to Mexico with 0 Spanish.
Okay.
I couldn't even count until 10. I remember the first, I mean, that's very private, but like the first date I had with my now husband, he was picking me up and I told him, like, I don't speak, and it was in my second week arriving in Mexico. And I was so scared because I've heard people saying Mexicans, they don't speak English. And I thought, like, oh my God, like, in German we say, Gottes Willen. Oh my God, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm having a date with someone. I don't even know, like, if they're Google translating everything to English. And then the first question he asked me was in Spanish, hi, how are you? And I got big eyes, thinking like, oh my God, I knew it. He doesn't speak any English. Fortunately, it was just a joke. He just wanted to test if I really don't speak any Spanish.
Right.
But that was my situation. And since, like, I then was able to be, like, included in a big group of, like, native Spanish speakers, that would obviously, I don't know, like, if you know that in Mexico City, where are you from?
I'm from Spain.
From Spain. Okay. Yeah. So in Mexico City, they have a very interesting slang where they would use different words, like in any language, but they, of course, like, if they would talk to each other, they would use their slang, and I would not understand a thing.
Right.
They took me, and then COVID hit, but I think it took me a year of spending there, meeting people who would translate everything to English, me only talking English, and actually the proper practice I had was when I was taking an Uber, a taxi, because there the driver wouldn't speak any English. I had my phone, I would translate, hey, can I put down the window, for example? Speaking it out loud. And also the drivers being super kind and super nice, talking extra slow, showing me different things. Actually giving me, like, real life comprehension while driving from point A to B.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I totally agree with you. I don't think that for a total beginner, immersion, just thinking about spending a couple of weeks in the target country to learn a language, that's not the thing. I think exactly what we are doing here, like starting from scratch through comprehension, proper comprehension, what you are doing, what I'm doing, what so many other creators are doing for free on YouTube, for example, is the key for the next step.
Yeah, it gets you to a point in which you can understand real life afterwards, right?
Right.
Because most of the time, people are not like that taxi driver. Like, people don't adjust the way they communicate to help you, right?
Yeah.
Friends would do it, but not a lot of people, right?
And not for too long if they're having such a great conversation about a very, very interesting topic. Yeah. I mean, my friends, they're awesome. The best people on this planet, right? But we're talking about language learning, and as we said before, this is very tricky.
Yeah. And so was it at that point that you started reading about comprehensible input, or was there a point in which you realized, like, this is not working with English, or with your experience in England, seeing how people taught German? Was there a point in which you thought to yourself, like, I don't know if this is working? And that you started getting into comprehensible input, and so how did that go?
Right. So I think one of the key moments, there were actually 2 key moments.
Okay.
I think one was, it was with 2 different people. So one was with my husband when he started to learn German in a German institute in Mexico. And he had been trying to learn German already before. And he always said, this course is divided into A1, A1.1. So like it's all those small steps. And he said, I can't get over this A1.4 level. I just can't get it, because there is when dative and accusative is being introduced and I can't comprehend it. It's not possible for me. And there I realized, starting with grammar, especially, I always say dative and accusative in German is the Königsdisziplin. Like it's the very top level. Exactly. And so many people on B2, C1, like don't get it correct all the time, because German, when it comes to grammar, it's just like, it has so many fine nuances. And even we native speakers don't speak it correctly all the time, especially when we are like in a casual situation. We're making so many grammar mistakes, sometimes out of dialect, because in the dialect it's spoken differently all over, or just because sometimes we're just bad with differentiating between dative and accusative. It's just like that. And then, so like there I thought like, wow, being on an A1 level, A1.4, so at the very, very beginning, starting with that, it's nonsense. Making that as a criteria for continuing to the next level or not is bollocks. Like it shouldn't happen. And then I had the situation with my mom. So my mom, I mean, she's older. She didn't have, we were talking about my English learning experience at school, which was not that great. My mom is older than me, so hers was even worse, right? But she always, since we are speaking most of the time English at home, she always wanted to learn English, like for the past couple of years. But she always said this one sentence, I am too old to learn a language. It's so much easier for you young people because it's just easier for children. It's easier. And that's this thought that so many language learners have, especially adult language learners. That's why I think it's even more important that we're doing what we're doing. And then, fortunately, she enrolled to an English course and she was so happy. And we were talking on the phone every day and I was asking her how her first class was. And she said, they're all better than me. I need to prepare for my next lesson. I will study everything. I'll read everything. I'll do all of the exercise because I'm scared. I don't want to be in the position again that I'm asked that question and I just can't answer it. I need to prepare everything. I'm going to write everything down. I'm going to prepare as good as possible. And there already I thought like, oh, seeing or hearing you just days before, being super excited about this experience and this opportunity and suddenly feeling scared and ashamed, that didn't feel well. And then 2-3 weeks afterwards, she gave up because she then said she, like all of her other classmates, they were younger, they were better, they could communicate. What happened to her was she was being asked a question in her head. Obviously, she had all of the verbs, all of the vocabulary ready. But then when she was asked to speak, there was silence in the room. You wouldn't be able to get it out. And as we were talking before, sentence structure is a thing, but of course also vocabulary. And there I realized the key to language success, learning success, it's also for students in school, is the feeling, the attitude. And I think Jeff Brown, but also Stephen Krashen always say it. The first step is having a good feeling about it, looking forward. That the biggest blocker in when it comes to learning anything, but specifically languages, is being scared, feeling ashamed, feeling not good enough. And I think that's the most important thing. So especially when it's about beginner courses, and I think that's exactly where TPRS or TPR is such a key method is about listening, being able to comprehend, getting used to the language, to the melody, to the sounds, being able to say yes and no if you personally feel ready to. But I think the worst thing that can happen to any student, especially on like entrance beginner level, is being asked open questions.
Exactly.
It's and that was the, like, unfortunately, I call it motivational death for my mom joining another class. So like I'm keen on like looking for an English course for beginners that it's actually like offering exactly that. But I'm also realizing English is such it's a question today nearly everyone grows up with, that it's so hard to find like beginner things like comprehensible.
Right.
Also on YouTube, it's most of the time more advanced. But yeah, those were the two: one on grammar and two on asking too much at the beginning.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, if your mom in this case tried to learn English and her first experiences are like that, like being asked in front of the class when you're starting with the language, it's like you said, it's one thing to say yes or no, and it's another thing to answer an open question, a why question, right? You know, like if the language is not in your head, you can't say anything. You know, it's just, and on top of that, if you're in front of people, everyone's silent and waiting for your response, like all the pressure in the world, like how it's, you know, it's bound to fail. It's impossible to enjoy that, right?
Right.
And so,
and also, and that's, I think that's what's so important to me. So like, and I feel like there is the whole system unfortunately lacking, like the school system, like how teachers teach subjects in school, but also for us as language teachers. I think like that's such a great feedback, where I feel like there is so much research out there. There is so much research on like how languages can be taught well, good. And I feel like our job as teachers is not only doing over and over and over again what we maybe did the last decades, but also like taking advantage of the research that has been done and implementing it in our teachings. So only because you are a trained teacher or only because you're a classist doesn't mean that you know everything. Only because I'm a native, it doesn't mean that I know everything, not only about the language, but also about like the best methods, proven methods to help other people learn it, right?
Right.
And I don't know, like I've often heard that people perceive teachers as being the people that believe that they always know everything best, that they have this, and I think like we all need to be a bit more humble and therefore like taking advantage of like what's out there, learning from each other, right? I feel like that's the most important thing about like being human and learning and teaching, because we can only teach what we learn from others, and we can only learn what we receive from others, and what we are like, what we want, what we are open enough to receive.
Yeah, I love that. I agree, of course. Yeah. And so was it in that moment that you decided to start your like YouTube channel to start teaching German in this way, or?
No, it was actually a bit later. So during the pandemic, I was super busy with my like students at school, because it was lockdown. We were in lockdown for half years. It was for everyone such a new experience that I was completely dedicated in my bread and butter, right? And helping the school, helping my students. And when we were moving to England, because here in England, most grammar schools are offering GCSEs and A-levels, BIB in German. So I got like a lot of requests for private classes. So, I mean, I've been teaching German always to a couple of students, but then in England it got a bit more and more. And then I felt like that it's getting a bit overwhelming. Like I couldn't serve, like it was a bit too much of a hustle, a bit too much stress, because obviously each student was on a different level. It was a lot of preparation. And then I thought like, okay, how can I serve my students and even more students in the future, which I can't serve anymore, like on this one-on-one level, and not burn out, because like as of now, I'm not earning, like I'm not doing YouTube full time. I'm not doing that full time. So I have my job, my full-time job. And of course I have to balance it out. But I felt like YouTube was the best platform of putting all of my like free time and energy into it, and creating input that's of great value to help many people. So that was the thing, and I started the channel a year ago. In August, I celebrated my first anniversary.
Nice.
Very happy. And I also, when it comes to the channel content, I tried different things. I started with the basic questions my students usually had. And you probably know it, most students ask questions about the grammar. And in German, another German word, I'm going to give you hard, tricky words to learn. I always call it verkopfen. Verkopfen, if you think too much with your head, and if you feel like that you need to know everything grammar-wise about the language before daring to speak. And so I started the channel with actually like answering those questions I've received along the way. And then I thought like, oh, it would be nice to offer like a whole course. But then I realized it was a bit tricky. Then I got into this intensive reading. So I like created a couple of stories. Then I had to, I had some disagreements with Stephen Krashen said about a comprehensible input, because he always said he doesn't know if he believes that reading at first or listening at first is more important. And when it comes to pronunciation, at least me, out of my experience, I can say start with listening. And if you want to start with reading, because there is more, let's call it input out there, especially for like more material for like adults, at least give both so that you can read and listen. And that's when I started with my stories, which I wrote, and then so where you can read it on the screen, but then also listen the pronunciation and maybe like even repeat it with me. And then I started with the vlogs, and there I got the response from the people that they really like it. And so it's a journey. Like I'll always adapt and read and learn about how to help people the most, and depending on the feedback.
Yeah, I really like what you're doing now, like teaching German in a natural way, in like a blog style, like you said, because I don't know, it's the closest thing to real life that you could do on YouTube. I mean, you could have conversations, of course, with other people. But I want to mention that I agree with you on the listening part. Like you can, I prefer to start by listening or both, like you said, because with German, for example, I started from scratch with another YouTube channel. I've talked about it several times. Her name is Catherine Shetman, and she's actually I don't know if a primary school teacher, I'd say. So
it's the blonde one with the glasses.
Wait, no. So she's primary school teacher, and the thing is, when the pandemic hit, she started. I mean, a little before that, to be honest. So she started recording her classes in school. Not showing the kids, of course, but she would just create, not create stories, but tell traditional stories. Like, and on the whiteboard, She would just tell the stories, write things down, draw, and things like that. And that for me as a complete beginner was awesome because those were meant for her to her kids, right? But then when the pandemic hit, she kept telling stories from home to send her students, but she posted them as well. So I learned by listening to, I don't know, the Three Pigs or Ashen Puzzle, things like that, right? And it was mostly listening, but she would write specific words down every now and then. And that's the way I got started, right? And then later on, I started listening to stories in which I could read the text as well, like you said. Because if you're starting by reading, I mean, I guess with German, I could get away with it because knowing English would help me to some extent. I felt that because there's some similarities, but still, I mean, I'd rather get to listening at the same time as well, right? But so, yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree that I personally start by listening or both. Mostly listening only, but it could be both. But I also wanted to ask you, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been talking about it recently, that I completely trust the comprehensible input theory of language learning. Like when I personally learn a language, I start by listening and reading, listening and reading for a long time until I feel like I'm ready to start communicating, right? So let's say that I got that first part, I got it down. Like I know what I have to do. I know that just by enjoying different types of content, and I mean, when it's comprehensible, of course, it needs to be, right? But recently, I've been thinking a lot about that moment in which you've been listening and getting input in the language for quite a while. You feel like you can understand a lot, and you feel like you want to start communicating, or you want to start trying, because you feel like the language in your head already, which is the case with German now for me, right? So where do you see it on that moment when you want to start communicating? Is there anything you do as a language student yourself, or is there anything you tell your students to do when they want to start communicating, or in your classes, do you encourage output at some point so they start the process of communicating? Where do you see it on that?
Right. I don't know is it okay if I talk shortly about my 6-step to fluency roadmap?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like this free handbook, which everyone can download for free.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'll leave the links to your channel and everything you want me to link below. That I forgot to say, but
that's awesome, because I feel like for everyone who's into language learning, and now we're talking about this transition because this transition is so important, and I think we like talking about comprehensible input should not forget about it, because it doesn't mean by listening and reading that one feels confident enough and prepared enough to talk. And in this 6 steps to fluency roadmap, I'm covering this with the TPRS method, I think in step 3, where in step 3, you start to, when you read or listen to a story, think about questions. And those questions in your head, you don't need to ask in the foreign language. You can ask it yourself in Spanish, in English, just to double check if you understood the content. For example, if in the video I say, ich habe 5 Finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you could ask yourself, how many fingers do I have? And you can use the same structure, ich habe 5 Finger. So like TPRS usually inside the classroom works exactly with, at the beginning, obviously with yes and no questions. For example, habe I would ask, habe ich 5 Finger oder habe ich 2 Finger? And you would only say ja or nein. So I think like this, yes and no. Exactly. And you said 5 as the next step. So I would assume as a teacher that you feel confident enough to continue to elaborate your answer. But for me, at the very first like words from my students, especially with babies, ja, nein, any sounds would be completely okay, because the student in that case, if it's a guided lesson, should decide 100% by themselves like how far they would go. 5 would be okay. If you want to repeat ich habe 5, we would write it down on the whiteboard, and you could repeat it. But like this repetition, it's not about output yet, right? It's not about output. It's just about repeating what you heard, repeating what one said. So repetition is the first thing to do before you're even asking yourself, why am I not being able to keep a conversation or answer a question that I'm asked by a native speaker? So I feel like that those techniques for learners, like starting to speak, are super duper important. But yes, how do you feel? Like, what's keeping you from speaking? Is it the opportunities that you don't have people to talk to, or what is it for you?
Yeah, I'll get to my part in a moment, because what I was thinking about is, I think that's great for pronunciation. I've been playing with it with German, and I've talked about it. Like, in my head, it sounded great when I said it, but then I said it out loud, and it's like, whoa. Like, for example, I those sounds in German, I had to say it several times to sort of get used to it. My only concern with pure repetition is you're not really building those sentences yourself. You know what I mean? You're just repeating like a parrot. Like, I'm not saying that's your case, but because when I talk about when to start outputting, sometimes I hear about shadowing or repeating, which I think is great for pronunciation. But I'm just a little bit concerned that you're just repeating things like a parrot, so you're not generating them yourself. As opposed to, I don't know, talking out loud, talking to yourself about what you did yesterday, for example. You were gonna say something. Sorry.
Right. And I think like that's a super valid point. Of course, at the beginning you're a parrot, you're just repeating. But we should also not forget that we need approximately 20 times listening the same word over and over again, experiencing the word in the context, so we can get the connection between word and meaning until we memorize the word. Some people are then already able to speak it out by themselves, but just considering the process of how long it takes to learn a language, right? And if we are also thinking about kids, how do kids start speaking? Like children, when they start to speak first, they are like blubbing, getting the feeling for the language, figuring out, does that make sense what I just said? Do people understand me? Like, that's how I want to translate it. And then repeating things until, and that's, we were talking before about like my previous video where you can also download the handbook, the ebook. But what do they then start? Pointing at things and naming things, right? So that's the first output. But thinking about us as adults, we usually start learning a language. Why? Because we want to be able to communicate it, because we need it for our job, for university, for different reasons. I see it with my learners, for them being patient enough to say, and I wrote it down just like to have the numbers sharp and that I'm not saying any something incorrectly. But the FSI, like the Foreign Service Institute, the US, they are breaking down like how long it takes, for example, for English speakers to learn certain languages. And for an English speaker, it takes approximately 750 hours to become fluent, which doesn't mean correctly, right? Speaking correctly and stuff.
Yeah, yes.
In German. Breaking that down into weeks, months, and years, how much input you can get. And therefore, I don't know like how you are learning German, for example, how much input you're actually receiving, like what's your learning strategy. But I know it from my students that one of my videos has maybe 15 minutes. I publish one video a week, which is not a lot. There is not much free content out there. Mm-hmm. And we should also not forget that there are many German like learning channels out there that are spoken by non-native speakers, mm-hmm. or that are automated voiceovers, which is not recommended. But I understand that people are consuming it because there is not enough mm-hmm. input out there. So I feel like patience along the process is key. If we're talking about when are you able to have a communication, I think first of all, like we were talking about the feeling, I feel confident. I feel like that my pronunciation is okay. When I say something, the other person understands. Mm-hmm. It all starts with repetition. If people already want to be able to have vocabulary, speak about free time or anything like that, there are exercises, and then you can always think about like, okay, maybe I don't like play football, but maybe tennis. So ich spiele gern Tennis. Mm-hmm. Easy, adaptable if you have the vocabulary. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is that sentence structure usually is always the same. And I feel like if we said before, 20 times you need to get the connection for one word. If you practice with those mirroring or you were mm-hmm. techniques, you dare to speak, you get used to the sentence structures. Mm-hmm. I think it's better than being in a conversation and not having having the feeling that I don't have the tools of speaking, mm-hmm. therefore not speaking, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah. Like I'll get to my example with German in a moment because I think it'll help you understand what I'm doing and what I meant by bridging that gap between input and output. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't saying that just mirroring is bad. What I'm saying is that then there's a next step later, which is to actually produce it yourself, mm-hmm. right? So I see it as a nice stepping stone. Like you said.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's only a stepping stone. Mm-hmm. And that's where I felt like that's the little bridge we need mm-hmm. to gain confidence, to gain like the knowledge of certain easy sentence structures mm-hmm. until you're in the situation where you're being asked, okay, what's your hobby?
Right.
And then you remember maybe in mm-hmm. bits and pieces, and she's like, build your sentence. I know that you're not so keen on teaching grammar and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like German is, with other languages, more complex languages, one of the languages where, compared to English specifically, that it's important for adult learners, but also for kids in certain grammar aspects, to understand the language. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about like introducing grammar rules or rules at the beginning of the language learning process. But let's say you were mentioning before, you don't know if you get the sentence structure right. Sentence structure is a big thing in German language mm-hmm. because there is a certain structure, and we only feel confident if you learned German through comprehensible input. The good thing is that you already get a feeling of what's kind of right and what doesn't feel right. And that's probably exactly your blocker, that you know, shoot, it doesn't feel right to me, but you don't maybe know how to change that because there is something missing. And maybe or that's my belief, if that's a problem for you, that maybe Dedicate and Jeff Brown is also calling it 30 second speed grammar. I don't know. He has this.
Yeah, like pop-up grammar or something.
Exactly, something like that. And I really, really love that because I feel like if there is a question, if students are already so advanced that they're thinking about why is it like that and why not like that, it's good to give like this pop-up input for them to understand. And I feel like German is so different from English, for example, where we have 3 genders, where we have adjective declinations. Everything is slightly different from one sentence to the other, that I feel like if a student like you probably is ready for that and can already verbalize their struggles, there's always a way to help and to explain something quickly, easily.
Right. Yeah, my fear with grammar always is that you're going to make students focus on form, which I'm trying to avoid. Of course, it's different, like you said, to teach grammar rules consciously than these little nuggets or pop-up grammar things, right? Because, for example, some people talk about, like I've interviewed Luca Lampariello, for example. He always talks about the fact that he starts with a little book called Asimil, and with their dialogues, right? But little grammar explanations. And he says that he doesn't want to learn the grammars. He just wants to get an idea of how the language works, right? I'm just afraid, in my case, and I see in a lot of people, that that's going to lead you to focusing on form and having to think about it. That's my fear. It's not that I'm totally against it. It's that, if we were able to just look at it and say, okay, this is how it works, fine. Let's go on with input, right? But I have the fear that that's going to focus the student on, or that's going to make the student focus on form, which is what I'm trying to avoid, right? But to explain it real quick, my experience with German is I started from scratch, like I said, and I've learned it by myself. I mean, by watching YouTube videos, not with a teacher. And I've been doing it for 3 years. I understand so much. Like I can understand native podcasts, depending on the person, and but I understand a lot. And like I said, I was in Germany two months ago, and I understood real conversations with people. I could talk. So, for example, I was talking about this example, but so I was in a train with my brother and another friend, and a man just started telling stories, like in the train, like and when the wall fell, I was 28, and blah blah blah, just telling stories, and I understood everything, right? And then so my brother's friend was next to me. And I told this man, like, I understand everything you're saying. He does, but he doesn't speak German. And then I was talking to another person next to me, German person in German, like, we're from Spain, but I live in Poland, blah, blah, blah. So I could do that. It's just the feeling that because I can understand pretty much everything, like I could understand everything they were saying. But I felt like if I had to keep the conversation going a little longer, I would struggle a little bit when it comes to, expressing everything I wanted to say, as opposed to how free I feel when I communicate in English, for example. Like back to your point, obviously I'm still making mistakes. I'm not always going to find the right words, but I'm perfectly okay in any type of situation. I can get my point across. So for me, the quote unquote struggle is, how to go from understanding so much and being able to speak a little bit to feeling as free as I feel with English, right? How to bridge that gap. Because when you get to the real world, the gap is too big that moment. If your first output experiences are the real world, there's a lot of pressure. Like in your case in England, maybe you don't understand what they're saying because they have a different accent and things like that, or that person speaks faster, whatever. So what I'm focusing on and what I'm trying to implement is little stepping stones, like the one you said, like talking to myself for a couple of minutes every day about what I did or what I like about this place. Or if I just listen to a podcast, what they talked about, for example. Or, finding a tandem partner. So the stakes are not so high. You know what I mean? Like it's because the other person's feeling the same way you're feeling, but about your language, right? So it's there's not as much pressure to communicate as there would be in a real life situation. So those are the types of things that I'm focusing on.
Right. Quick question, Alvaro. Yeah. How many years do you speak English?
Good question. I mean, so I had pretty much the same experience as you did with school. Like I studied English for many years, and I could pass a grammar exam, but I couldn't speak the language. But the funny thing is, later when I started reading about crashing and so on, I realized that what really helped me out with English was watching the NBA in English. For a long time, like a lot of games, a lot of comprehensible input. Thanks to the background I had in English, which didn't allow me to be able to communicate, but at least it was more comprehensible. And then the nature of a sport event, because there's a commentator, you see what's going on at the same time, so it's easier to make the connection. It's more comprehensible, right? And then when I came to Poland for the first time for an Erasmus experience, everything was in English, like university classes, international atmosphere, friends from France, Germany, Slovakia, so we used English. And I could communicate already, quote unquote, like magically. So because of that, I always thought that by just getting input, output is going to show up, which is true. But what I've been thinking about recently is, before I came to Poland for the first time, I did try to use English as much as I could in my little town in Spain. There wasn't a lot of chances, but I remember, for example, like meeting a Nigerian guy that I would, bump into at night several times, and we would start speaking English. So little things like that. So I'm coming to the conclusion that input is what you need to get there, and input only is gonna help you start the process of communicating, right, by itself. But you do need practice. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's, I think, where
But to answer your question, I think I've been communicating in English so I'm talking about 2011, the Erasmus experience I'm talking about. So that's at 13 years, plus the years I've been listening to the NBA already. So yeah, sorry, Go ahead.
and exactly, and we were talking about speaking, your output, speaking experience. And I'm pretty sure that while already listening and like receiving the input, you were already in English able to say, my name is, I like, I don't like.
Yeah.
You told me that you started with German 3 years ago, right? So we have this, how many years was it? 13 years English, but already with previous...
Yeah, nearly 20. Yeah. I mean, not 20, but more than 15.
Yeah. But at least like probably 15 years ago, being able to communicate your basics, right? And I feel like it's always, with adult learners, it's always the same, because starting with a language like English from little on, you feel like it's natural to you. It's kind of like your second language. But then when you start only 3 years ago, you want to be on the same fluency level.
Oh, yeah.
And I draw a line between receiving, digesting comprehensible input, and outputting it. Because it needs a different practice. I believe, and probably Stephen Krashen would probably also disagree with that. I believe that it needs more than only comprehensible input to be able to output. Input is important because you always, especially at the beginning, want to be in the position to understand everything. Because what happens, and that's exactly the struggle, what happens if you try to output first? So like in the ebook, I'm also talking about the silent period, which is super important before talking. Because what happens if you try to talk first? So for example, you have the first lesson like my mom had, or like any other. So like first lesson topic, introduction. And then you're asked to introduce yourself. It's your very first lesson. You focus, and you know, every language learner probably knows that you have those conversations with yourself where you are thinking about a question, you're thinking about how you answer that and stuff. What happens if you don't keep the silent period and just focus on input? It's you're getting stuck in exactly that couple of sentences to output, not being able to fully embrace the input of and truly be open and understand what people are saying. So you block your own learning process. And it's more important to understand people than to speak. So I think like it's super, like I think that comprehensible input at the beginning is very, very important up until A2. I think from B1, if you like understand like the basics, if you can introduce yourself, because that's like usually all of the basic things you describe with my name is, I'm old, I'm from, etc. Like it's, the sentences are so short. There is like not too much to extend on. So I feel like this is awesome. You can cover all of that with comprehensible input. If you want to have then a real life conversation, you need exposure, and you need to dare speaking. And you can practice it exactly with the methods you were mentioning before. I'm also covering one method in my most recent video about like language learning. It's about naming things. I think that's especially for beginners, A1, A2, like that's the key. Like you watch a video, but you need to practice speaking. You walk around in your house in the nature, you see stuff, and you need to point out and
like a window. Sure.
Okay. Exactly. In German, specifically because we're talking in German, I always say learn the articles with the nouns. Because that will help you further on, and it will also help you understand why it's suddenly eine or kein, right? Because that would otherwise be the next question. And as you said, have conversations with yourself. If you don't have any native person to speak to, if you don't have a tandem partner, for example, do that. I'm for A1, A2 level. I love crosstalk, and I know that you have been talking about that on your channel many, many times, but I also say crosstalk in the most natural way of me keeping my whole conversation in German, you keeping your whole conversation in Spanish, only until mid A2, because then usually people want to talk. people hear something and they already say like, okay, I want to formulate that sentence. And I feel like the moment when you feel like you have the urge of speaking, do everything you can to speak. Mm-hmm. And that's usually where I would recommend speaking circles, where you can just practice at the very beginning, because often we feel too shy of speaking to natives. Mm-hmm. It's good to have other German learners, and you can make mistakes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you relearn everything you know, but you'll figure out, okay, I think that was incorrectly said, but you don't necessarily adapt it to your own speaking if you don't speak too much with not natives. Mm-hmm. And if you continue with your native German comprehensible practice or reading. But yeah, I think the methods you were mentioning, talking to yourself, most important thing, speak it out loud, have the conversations in your head, getting tandem partners, looking for like German speaking circles and stuff is key. You need practice and exposure.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Like I keep getting comprehensible input, but I'm doing exactly what I said. Like I'm talking to myself out loud about what I did yesterday, about the podcast I just listened to, etc. And I have to say that I'm really enjoying it, by the way.
Sorry?
Sorry, that I have to say that I'm really enjoying it.
That's key.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's what I meant, actually. Like, input only, it gets the language in your head, and it starts the process of output, meaning what I told you about in my experience in Berlin, that I could say, so I understand what you're saying, but he doesn't. But taking it to the next level, you do need to practice. That's the one thing I've changed my mind most on, where like, because I used to believe in magically outputting after just input. Yeah, exactly. That's the part of, because it came from reflecting on my experience with English, but thinking about it, that recently I realized that no, I was doing other things. Like I was trying to communicate. Yeah. And I wanted to, not ask you, but you want to talk about a comment that you recently got, right? That is actually related to this idea.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like that we've already covered it, don't you think? But shall I read it again?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. So, right. One subscriber was sharing his experience, right, with us. And I'll just read it. And then maybe we have like 2-3 minutes to maybe like summarize everything we've probably already talked about. Mm-hmm. So, I'm learning German by the most difficult way possible. So that's how he's, or she, I don't know, is naming the process. Just by comprehensible input. I'm not using any type of English material to help me. No subtitles, no explanations, nothing. So, Alvaro, first step. This person is calling it the most difficult way by not using subtitles, no explanations, no English material to help. Do you think the first step, even though it's called the most difficult way possible, do you think he's doing that?
So I think by the most difficult, he or she means that he or she is not using any help, like subtitles, and not the most difficult in a general sense, right? But that's exactly what I did, to be honest. Right. And and I got to a point in which I can understand so much German. Like I said, like native speakers, native podcasts. So with languages like German, French, English, Spanish, I feel like you have enough content to get there. Just without help, like he said, right? If you're trying to learn Swahili, you're probably gonna struggle a bit more. Mm-hmm. Like to find enough input. Because what I did with German is I wasn't using any subtitles, but because the content creators were creating content for me, or for students to understand what they were talking about through gestures, images, writing little things down. So they were making it comprehensible for me, right? But that's why I think it's fine. Like that's what I did. That's what I do when I'm learning a new language. If there's enough content, and as I think was the case with German, because it got me to a point in which I could start the process of understanding native content or content that is not specifically made for students, right? So that's my first observation.
I personally also think that using no subtitles, or at least no translation and stuff like that, is important. But the question is nothing, no explanations, nothing. So if I just say, ich habe eine Hand, what does hand mean? What did I even say? The explanation, so like input is the one thing, but making it comprehensible is the task. So I'm not sure if the frustration, which I sense by reading that, comes from that maybe the content that's consumed is not comprehensible, because what means comprehensible? I+1, according to Stephen Kroshen.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the key factors here that could be useful for every beginner. And there we differentiate between immersion and comprehension. Like you can immerse yourself, but I agree with you, what you said, it's not necessarily helpful. Whereas if you're learning through comprehension or comprehensible input, you need to find resources. Like you need to find specific channels, specific materials that suit your level. And I think like that this is so difficult. This is so difficult for most languages, but I have not. So, and that's why I'm creating actually a second channel, because I've realized people are coming to my channel because there is not too much out there. There are not too many beginner German channels out there, but we need something even 2 steps below.
Okay.
Something that's really starting with the very, very basic, and that in the most comprehensible way possible. So what I sense is that this person had exactly this, or has exactly this problem that...
Right. Yeah, when you said no explanation, in my head, I was thinking about grammar explanations. And I thought it is not necessary because I didn't get it. But obviously, with the example you gave, you do need to, as a teacher, you need to point at it. Or as a student, you need the teacher, the content creator to point at it so you know what they're talking about, right?
Right.
Or write it down. Because of the similarities between the word in German and in English, that's enough. But you need for it to be comprehensible. Of course, that's like the channel I mentioned, that's how I started learning. Because she made it comprehensible.
You need to send me the channel. I'm so interested because I don't know this.
She was basically telling like fairy tale stories to her students, but drawing, pointing at things.
Like Anna from Natürlich Deutsch.
That's the second channel I used.
Yeah, amazing.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, like so I understand what you're saying now. That explanation. So in my head I was thinking about grammar or form explanation. So that's why I said that you don't need it, or I didn't need that, right? But obviously you do need the explanation when it comes to pointing, using images, so it's comprehensible. Otherwise, it's noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I understand the frustration if that's what he or she is talking about.
Right. Okay. But maybe you're right. I don't know. Maybe by no explanations, maybe grammar was meant. I don't know. It's not like they're it doesn't say
Not
everything.
clear.
But if it was grammar, I think it's fine. Like, don't focus on grammar, especially at the beginning, right?
Yep.
And then next sentence, just listening and watching things all in German. And I think, I don't know, what do you think about this? Maybe that's summarizing what we just mentioned, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I said, as long as it's comprehensible, I love it.
Yeah.
But if it's just having German in the background but not understanding what they're talking about, it's not helping. Like I see, for example, I see this a lot with people in Spain when it comes to English. Like they would watch series in English, hoping that at least it's something. It's better than watching in Spanish. And I'm like, okay, you're going to get a word here and there, but if you're a beginner English student and you're watching a series, you might watch like 100 hours of a series, and it's not really going to help you that much because it's mostly noise.
Right.
So that's the key thing for me in that message. Like, if he or she is listening to German, even if it's 10 hours a day, let's go to the extreme. But he or she is not understanding what they're talking about, it's not helping, or it's really, really going to be slow. And just one word here and there because of some context, or, randomly they said the word and you saw the object. So you make the connection, but it's not going to work.
Right. I had to think about a situation I had with my husband, because he obviously is also learning German, and he loves easy German. And he was watching this one video about how much people earn in Germany or something like that, because he's super into finances and all of that. And he was listening that, and I thought, like, that's way too complicated for you. Why are you watching this? And for him, it's perfect because they also put the English subtitles in the video and stuff. And I said, how did you understand it? Yeah, by reading the translation. And I said, okay, and how much did you understand in German? Nothing. I was focusing on. So, like, that's exactly the thing. So, also on my channel, and out of my perspective, of my personal view, I try to make my videos as comprehensible as possible by showing and explaining everything, like, as good as possible. And people are always asking about subtitles and translation to English. And I'm in this inner conflict of, I know it's not good for you, but on the other side, like, if people are asking for it, and I know that people are learning with different methods, and I know there's also this translation method out there and stuff. So me trying to navigate, what do I know, research-based, what are my values, like, on my channel, and where do I find compromises, and where do I also understand, okay, there is so little content out there, maybe people from, like, learning with other methods also want to aprovechar, like, take advantage of this, right? And this is tricky, but as you also say, in fact, it should not be done, right? Just consuming things you don't understand yet.
Yeah, it's just not going to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I could listen to Mandarin Chinese for 10 hours a day, every day, but I know like 2-3 words. So, I'm listening to Chinese for 10 hours a day, but what? It's just noise. For my head, it's noise. And what you were mentioning about subtitles, for example, I think mostly that's the conscious part of our brain as adults that wants to control everything. Like, that freaks out when we don't control things.
And it's also super interesting because, like, if you try to do it with you were mentioning Mandarin before, right? Or a language you don't know yet, or maybe just like very, very basics. As soon as you have the translation to English or your first language, you read it, you don't listen it anymore. Like, there is no way that And that's the interesting thing about people. We human, we think that we can do multitasking, but also that's proven not to be true. Like we can't do or focus on two different things at the same time, and that's the same with reading and listening. Our brain just doesn't have the capacity to do that. So
and it's funny because you were mentioning Easy German. Like I mostly listen to their podcast because that's German only listening. I'm not seeing anything. But sometimes I watch their videos, and what I do is I put my hand like this to not look at the English part.
That's interesting.
So I'm actually trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
Because I know my eyes are going to go there if I don't do it.
Yeah.
So I listen to the video because there's the German subtitles and the English underneath. So I block them.
That's so good. But that's also the thing why I feel like before even starting to learn a language, you have to know stuff about language learning, how your mind works, how you can just like do that. So congratulations to your beautiful channel where everyone can learn exactly that and have a deep dive on that. Okay, let's continue. It's a long comment. So she's listening and watching things. We just had that all in German. I learned some vocabulary trying to comprehend what I'm watching and listening. By the things that I saw and heard, I learned what means brother, sister, eyes, ears, mouth, and some items as well. Can I really get fluent going this? So, and it continues, probably not. But this is a challenge that I accept. Probably I can take all my life to fulfill this, or maybe I can die without learning German. But or without. I'm gonna read it as he's said it. Or maybe I can die without learn German. But I'm trying my best. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. He or she says probably not. I was actually gonna say that. I think you can if you do it the right way. Because just back to what we were talking about. Yeah, if you're listening to the language every day, but you don't understand what they're saying, you're never going to get there. Or you're going to need forever, like he or she's saying. But if you understand what they're talking about, of course you can, Like I did it with English. I'm doing it with German. I've done it with other languages. I say it with people all the time. So to me, it's about how you're going about it. That's what I think. Like if you listen to comprehensible input, you enjoy what you're doing. The content you're consuming is made for you or for students to understand what they're saying. It's helping you. My feeling by reading the comment is that this person is not understanding most of what he or she's listening to. Right? That's why. So it's a comment to your videos. So maybe this person is listening to your videos, but it's not at the point in which he or she can understand what you're saying. He gets pieces here and there, which is better than nothing, but it's not ideal. That's my point. It's back to like I plus 1 that you said that Crush mentions. It's probably I plus 12 for that person. So it's better than nothing, like I said, but it's not ideal, and that's why he or she feels like it's gonna take him or her forever.
Right, and I think one thing I would also like to mention, maybe just to wrap it up exactly. It's not only that I plus 1, but also what Krashen also says over and over again. It's high quality content.
Oh yeah.
Right? High quality content and focused listening. Because I also feel like it happens probably to you, to me, that we are learning a new language and we scroll on the phone while listening to something or while watching something, like a good comprehensible input video on YouTube. And it's all about being present in the moment and really dedicating yourself for those 5, 10, 15 minutes really to consume this quality content. And then, I mean, I know that some of my students do that. They watch a video, they grasp like those basic words, or maybe like where the words are written to, or where it's like properly shown. And then after 1 or 2 weeks, they're coming back and they're rewatching. And then often I get response, wow, like this week I understood much, much more and I learned more. So if you realize that there is, as we like think, we like our theory is that this person doesn't find like the content that's proper for their language level, and therefore they feel frustrated. So if you have that situation, then focus, like completely get the, I think Russian always says, pointing at something, but also words and stuff. You decide what makes something comprehensible. And I feel like we just need to differentiate to like not focusing on translation, not working too much with translation, but whatever helps you, use it as a tool to make stuff more comprehensible.
Right. Yeah, you mean like pointing or gestures or images or words in the target language. Yeah.
Right. And then just using the same content. You don't need 10 different videos. If you feel like that the easiest one is already a bit of a pain for you, a bit too hard, just take your time and go over it again and again.
Yeah, then in that case, it also goes to the compelling part of the input that Russian talks about, because what I mean is, obviously it depends on how much content is there, right, available. Because for me personally, if it's possible, I prefer to watch different content because it makes it more interesting for me. Because if I'm watching the same video 2, 3, 4 times, the third time, I mean, like, technically it's better because you're going to understand more, but you already know what happens.
Yeah.
Right? And that works because a lot of people talk about this with series. So should I watch a series in English, for example, that I already know in Spanish, from the perspective of a native Spanish speaker? Should I watch Friends in English, for example, because I already watched it in Spanish, my native language, and I know what they're talking about? From a technical standpoint, yes, that helps. From an enjoyment point of view, you know what I mean? Because it's not new. It's not, and for me, whatever content I'm consuming, not knowing what's going to happen is part of the thrill. You know what I mean?
That is very interesting that you say that, because for me, I remember when I was able to read my favorite book for the first time in English and I understood, and knowing this other book in German, in my first language, helped me a lot get the connection without the direct translation. So I also feel like there is a difference in like learners. Every person is like a different learning type. And interesting that for you it wouldn't be as enjoyable, whereas for me, starting with the language, like I would have those success moments. I would feel like, oh yes, I understood, and it will be easier.
Yeah, it depends on where in the journey you are at. At the beginning, you probably can use that a little more.
Right.
But as I'm getting better and better, I'm going to be able to find other resources, you know. Right. But like I say, it makes sense from a standpoint of learning the language because of what you said, because you already know the story. So it's going to be more comprehensible than otherwise. But for me, I'm always, I don't know, not knowing what's going to happen from the story standpoint.
Yeah.
makes it more enjoyable, more interesting for me. But it's, there's a little thing.
Yeah, totally.
Right. All right. So that was fun. Lari, thank you.
It was, yes, it was so interesting. I feel like I go out of this podcast with a lot of understanding, more knowledge. I learned so much from you just through the conversation, through this exchange of ideas and experience and knowledge. I'm really, really enjoying that. Thank you so much.
Glad to hear that. And I certainly feel the same way. And just any final message for language learners out there?
So I think the most important message I want to spread is, first of all, enjoy the process. That is, like, have a goal, know why you're learning the language. Why is it beneficial to you? Why does it bring value to your life to learn this language? Because I feel like you always need to have like a goal in a sense. And then be patient. Be patient. Language learning is a process, like, I don't know, like, you can't start a job and thinking that you know it all and that you're able to do everything. You need some time. I need some time, and not only time at the beginning, but also a lot of repetition. And for us adult learners, it's always, we want to speak immediately. We learn a language to be able to communicate and to speak.
Yep.
But considering how many years kids need to be able to expand their vocabulary and everything, to be able to talk about more complex topics in their mother tongue, we can't be too harsh on ourselves. And we can't take the happiness and peace and excitement away from ourselves by putting too much pressure on ourselves.
I love that. Yeah, because we'd all love to learn the language in 6 months, but it's just not going to happen.
And also, are you willing to put the time into it? I mean, we're all, like, we all have jobs, we all have hobbies, families and stuff. We need to nurture so many more things than just like our second, third, fourth language, even though it's one of our hobbies. But just coming back to those 750 hours to become fluent in German, if you're coming from a language like English, break it down and dedicate yourself, I don't know, like 30, 20 minutes per day of active listening, of quality content. Find this, that you have enough resources throughout those 2 years and you'll be successful.
Good. Awesome. So, yeah, thank you again, Lari. Like I said, it was a pleasure, and I'm sure people will enjoy it. And like I said before, I leave links to all your, like, your channel, the free ebook that you mentioned, and any other thing that you want me to link to.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, the ebook is only interested for people that are interested in language learning. But I think it's of great value because it's also introducing people to different methods, like proven methods. And for anyone who wants or is considering learning a new language, this could be of good help for just planning out the journey in advance.
Yes. All right. Have a good day, Lari.
Thank you, Alvaro. You too. It was a pleasure talking to you. What a great start into the week.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you want to know more about language learning, language acquisition, like, what's the best way to learn a language, ideas for language learning, the best resources at different levels, here you can find the whole playlist with all the interviews I've done so far with different researchers, teachers, polyglots, and so on. And finally, right here, you smash this guy right in the face to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.